Let's unpack this. You've sent over some really fascinating material about Billy the Kid.
Yeah, quite a bit to sift through.
Definitely. We've got excerpts on his early life, his, first run-ins with the law, and how he eventually became this legend of the Old West.
Hmm.
So our mission here really is to cut through some of the myths, understand the key events, the turning points that shaped the life of Henry McCarty.
Or William H. Bonney.
Right, alias William H. Barney, better known as Billy the Kid. You wanted a quick but thorough understanding, and I think we've pulled out the most compelling insights from these sources.
It's interesting, isn't it, why his story still grabs people.
Yeah,
We picture these outlaws as, I don't know, larger than life from the start.
exactly. But these sources really ground us in, well, the details of his early years, how it all started.
Yeah, the formative stuff.
We're going to trace his journey from basically an orphan teenager to this wanted outlaw. We'll touch on his involvement in the Lincoln County War.
Which was huge.
Yeah, and the events that really cemented that notorious reputation. We'll also dig into some specifics about his early life and what set him on that path.
You can really see a progression in the material.
You really can. You'll see how the sequence of events, starting with what looks like pretty petty theft, kind of spiraled. Spiraled into a life of violence and ultimately into legend.
That gradual escalation is key, I think. It wasn't just one big dramatic moment, but more like a chain reaction. Circumstances, choices leading him down that road.
So let's start right at the beginning.
Huh.
He was born Henry McCarty in New York City.
Right.
The sources suggest either September 17th or maybe November 23rd, 1859, to Irish Catholic parents Catherine and Patrick McCarty.
So even his birthday, it's shrouded in a bit of mystery from the get-go.
Isn't it just such a basic fact, and it's uncertain? Shows how quickly the facts got tangled up with legend.
Yeah. What we do know from the material, though, is he had a younger brother, Joseph, born around 1863.
And there's also some ambiguity about where exactly in New York City he was born. But what's clear is the instability early on.
Definitely.
His father dies, which leads Catherine and the boys to Indiana. And that's where she meets William Henry Harrison Antrim.
And if you think about that time period, those kinds of moves were pretty common, weren't they?
Yeah.
Families chasing opportunity, stability.
Absolutely, that pursuit of something better. So, the family moves again, Wichita, Kansas in 1870, then later Santa Fe, New Mexico territory.
Getting closer to where he'd make his name, so to speak.
Right. And Catherine marries Antrim in Santa Fe, March 1st, 1873. The boys, Henry and Joseph, were witnesses.
Must seem like a fresh start, maybe some security for them. For a time, anyway.
Yeah, but as the sources show, that stability, it didn't last.
No.
They move again to Silver City, New Mexico,
Yeah.
and that's where Joseph actually takes Antrim's last name.
Mm-hmm.
But then real tragedy strikes. Catherine dies of tuberculosis, September 16th, 1874.
Awful. And Henry was only, what, 14?
14. And what's really stark is that William Antrim, his stepfather, basically abandons the boys. Just leaves them.
Wow, so he's an orphan, truly alone at 14. That's incredibly rough.
It's got to be a pivotal point, right?
Yeah.
Losing his mother, abandoned by his stepfather at that age, it must have had a huge impact.
Oh, undoubtedly. It really sets the stage for understanding maybe some of the choices he makes later on. You can see how that could shape someone.
It certainly seems that way. So he ends up in a boarding house, run by a Sarah Brown. He's working there for his room and board.
Trying to get by.
Yeah. But then comes his first documented brush with the law.
Right. This is just a year after his mother died,
Yeah.
September 1875.
Mm-hmm.
He gets arrested for stealing food.
Food. Seems like a minor thing, maybe driven by need, given his situation.
You'd think so, but then...
But then just 10 days later, things escalate quite a bit. He's involved in robbing a Chinese laundry with someone else, George Schaefer.
Okay, so that's a jump.
Yeah, they stole clothing and 2 pistols.
The pistols are significant. That rapid shift from, like, stealing food to armed robbery,
Mm-hmm.
it's striking. Suggests maybe a quick descent into more serious stuff.
Desperation, maybe? Bad influences?
Could be. Or maybe just the path he was on.
He gets arrested again, but he escapes from jail just 2 days later.
He doesn't stick around long.
No. And according to the Silver City Herald, this is his first mention in the papers as a fugitive.
So at only 16, he's already an escaped fugitive. Yeah.
That first escape feels like a big turning point, doesn't it? It marks him as an outlaw, officially, and probably shapes how he sees himself, his options.
Definitely. No going back easily after that.
He apparently stayed with Antrim again briefly, but then steals clothing and guns from him and leaves for good.
Ouch.
Yeah, that was apparently their last contact. Seems like any chance of a family connection just evaporated.
Paints a picture of him becoming more isolated, right? And maybe more desperate, severing those last ties.
So he travels, goes to southeastern Arizona territory, works as a ranch hand for a bit, does some gambling.
The gambling's an interesting detail. Hints at maybe a personality drawn to risk, which kind of fits his life, doesn't it?
It does. And in 1876, he gets mixed up with John R. Mackey.
Mac.
Scottish-born guy, criminal past, former U.S. cavalry private. Seems like potentially an influential figure for him to meet.
Oh, absolutely. Someone like Mackey with that kind of background, crime, military, he probably taught the kid a thing or two. Maybe not good things, but practical things for that life.
Like horse stealing.
Yeah.
Because they formed a partnership and started stealing horses from soldiers at Camp Grant.
Right. That's a step up in risk, stealing from the Army.
Definitely. And it's around this time doing this stuff that he starts getting known as Kid Antrim.
Ah, the nickname.
Yeah, because he was young, his build, his looks, his personality, apparently. The kid part starts to stick.
Makes sense.
Then, around 1877, the sources say he starts using the name William H. Bonney.
A new identity.
Do you think that was deliberate, like trying to shed the Henry McCarty past?
It's quite possible. I mean, it was pretty common for outlaws, wasn't it? Trying to dodge the law, maybe even psychologically distance themselves from who they were before. William H. Bonney sounds, I don't know, more like an outlaw name.
It does. And then, in August 1877, things take a much darker turn. The violence escalates dramatically.
Yeah, this is the Cahill incident.
Right. A fatal fight with a blacksmith, Francis P. Windy Cahill, in a place called Bonita.
This seems like another huge turning point. His first recorded killing.
What kicked it off?
Well, the sources suggest it started with bullying, name-calling. Cahill apparently called Bonney a pimp.
Oof. And Bonnie.
Retaliated. Called him the son of a bitch. Things got heated fast.
So a verbal spat turns physical.
Exactly. They struggled over Bonnie's revolver. And in the struggle, Bonney shoots Cahill. Mortally wounds him. Cahill dies the next day.
Wow. There's that witness statement, too, isn't there, in the material?
Yeah, the one saying Billy had no choice. He had to use his equalizer.
His equalizer tells you something about the mindset, maybe. Or how others saw it. Self-defense. Or perceived self-defense.
Or just the reality of confrontations back then.
Yeah.
But whatever the perception, he'd killed a man.
So Bonney flees. But then, kind of surprisingly, he actually comes back.
He does. Why?
Unclear. But he gets apprehended by the local justice of the peace, Miles Wood, detained at the Camp Grant guardhouse.
Okay, so maybe facing the music.
Doesn't sound like it for long. Because before the proper law enforcement could arrive, he escapes. Again.
Of course he does.
Steals a horse, flees Arizona territory, heads back towards New Mexico territory. He's clearly not sticking around to face charges.
That second escape. It just reinforces that image, doesn't it? Slippery,
right.
Unwilling, maybe unable to live within the law. He's getting known for getting away.
But his journey back to New Mexico wasn't exactly smooth sailing.
Oh.
According to the sources, Apaches took that stolen horse he was riding, left him stranded.
Ouch. So he's on foot?
On foot, heading for Fort Stanton. You can just imagine. Escaping custody only to end up stranded, vulnerable, really underscores how precarious life was, especially on the run.
Yeah, out of the frying pan into the fire.
He was apparently near death when he sought help from a guy named John Jones.
And who was he?
Member of the Seven Rivers Warriors gang. They were a known group of ranchers, rustlers, often clashing with the big cattle operations in the area.
Ah, so falling in with another rough crowd.
Seems so. Jones's mother nursed Bonney back to health, and that connection proved pretty significant.
How so?
Well, it leads him deeper into that world. He joins a band of rustlers based at Apache Tejo, and they start raiding herds owned by John Chisholm.
The big cattle king of Lincoln County.
Exactly. So now he's directly involved in a major local conflict over cattle and land.
And people are noticing. He gets spotted back in Silver City, apparently. Newspapers mention him being involved with these rustlers. His reputation's starting to spread.
Right. And following this, he joins up with the regulators.
Okay, now we're getting into the Lincoln County War.
Yep. He gets deeply embroiled in the Lincoln County War of 1878. This was basically a power struggle, right, between established cattle barons like Chisholm and newer merchant factions vying for control.
Economic and political rivalries boiling over into violence.
And Bonney picks a side.
He does. And being part of the regulators on one side of this really intense, bloody feud, well, it escalates things for him personally.
Big time.
As a result of his actions during the war, he ends up charged with killing 3 men, including William J. Brady
The sheriff of Lincoln County.
and one of Brady's deputies. Killing a sheriff and a deputy. The legal heat is on, seriously now.
Yeah, that takes him from being just another outlaw or rustler to, well, a high-profile killer, a prime target for the law.
And his notoriety just explodes. December 1880, you've got stories hitting the Las Vegas Gazette here in New Mexico, and even the Sun newspaper way out in New York City.
Wow. So he's gone national. The legend is starting to take shape across the country. People are fascinated by this young gunman. But all that attention means the law is closing in. His time on the run is limited. Sheriff Pat Garrett captures him in December 1880.
Garrett, the man who becomes almost as famous as the kid, in a way.
In a way, yeah. So capture seemed like the end of the road for Bonnie.
Looked like his luck had finally run out.
He goes on trial, convicted of Sheriff Brady's murder in April 1881, sentenced to hang the next month in May.
So, face of the gallows, it really seems like this is it, the final chapter.
He wasn't, because on April 28th, 1881, he pulls off this incredibly dramatic escape from the Lincoln County Jail.
This is the famous one.
The really famous one. And in the process, he kills 2 of Sheriff Garrett's deputies who were guarding him, James Bell and Robert Ollinger.
Just unbelievable audacity, escaping days before he's set to hang, killing his guards. That act alone cemented his legend, didn't it? Made him seem almost mythical.
Absolutely. It fueled all those stories about his cunning, his ruthlessness, maybe even made him seem, I don't know, invincible to some.
Yeah.
It's pure Wild West folklore dynamite.
Exactly. Movie stuff right there.
He manages to stay free for over 2 months after that escape, hiding out, moving around.
Garrett must have been determined to get him back.
Oh, relentless. Garrett tracks him down to Fort Sumner, and there, on July 14th, 1881, Garrett finds him in a darkened room at Pete Maxwell's house.
The final showdown.
Garrett shoots and kills him. Just like that. William H. Bonney, Billy the Kid, dead at 21.
21. Such a short, violent life, but packed with enough incident to fill volumes.
And even his death didn't end the story, did it?
Not at all. Those legends started almost immediately. Rumors that he'd survived, that Garrett shot the wrong man.
Yeah, several guys over the decades actually claimed to be Billy the Kid. Brushy Bill Roberts is maybe the most famous one.
Right. None of those claims were ever proven, of course. Historians mostly dismiss them. But it just shows the power of his story. You know, people wanted to believe he'd somehow cheated death again.
He's still this notorious figure of the Old West. And his life, his image, it's been dramatized constantly. Over 50 movies, TV shows. He's a pop culture icon.
Yeah. He really embodies that outlaw archetype, doesn't he? The romanticized, maybe misunderstood, rebel against authority in the Wild West, even if the reality was much grittier.
So when you look back at it all, starting with that difficult childhood, the loss, the abandonment, Henry McCarty's life took such a sharp turn after those first arrests. Stealing food, then the laundry robbery.
Small things escalating.
Yeah, and the killing of Cahill seems like such a critical moment, pushing him further down that path onto the run, leading him right into the Lincoln County War. It's remarkable how a teenager stealing food became one of the most enduring legends of the entire American West.
It really is. And thinking about how those relatively small events, the stolen meal, the robbery, that argument with Cahill, how they created this ripple effect that defined his whole short but incredibly impactful life.
Mm-hmm.
It makes you think, doesn't it, about that interplay between, individual choices and the circumstances people find themselves in, especially in a place like the frontier back then. So much uncertainty, so much violence.
Lawless, rapidly changing. Yeah. It definitely raises an interesting question, maybe something for listeners to chew on.
What's that?
What specific parts of Billy the Kid's story do you think really contributed the most to his lasting legendary status? Was it the sheer violence, his incredible escapes from justice, or is it more about that romanticized image, the young, maybe even charismatic outlaw in that harsh landscape?
Good question. Probably a mix of all of it, right?
Probably, but worth thinking about. Maybe next time we can dive even deeper into the mythology that's kind of grown up around the man versus the reality.
Sounds like a plan.